life is going to get her before the big C does. But she just found herself in a very dark place just at the mention of it. My wife was just having to look after her for a while, but she's fine now and kind of accepting it. Apart from having a very um, unattractive nose, which is leading her not to go out in public. But hey ho, it's very unaggressive, so it will be fine. And like I say, the unfortunate thing will be probably life will get her before that does. Where are you, Wayne?
I'm sitting in my truck in a parking lot of an environmental project that I have, um,
Wow,
and so I was trying to get to where the sun was not right in my face, and it's not now, so that's great.
England. Never normally a problem we have over here.
Well, just the opposite here. I don't remember the last time we haven't had perfectly clear skies, and so it's very dry. We had a very, very dry winter and scary. Fire conditions are going to get to be a problem. So,
Yeah, I was quite surprised this winter because I'm a big snowboarder, and last winter we had virtually no snow. This winter we've had loads. In fact, at times we went to a resort called Chamonix in the French Alps, which is a beautiful resort. But when we got there, um, they had closed about 40% of the resort because of avalanche risk
uh,
and other things. And it was, and then the second week we were there. We drove back home and came back out for a few days because it was just there was no snow. We couldn't really do anything apart from with all the avalanche risk and stuff. We came back the following week because things changed. But then literally it was 16, 18 degrees every day and fall conditions and just absolutely balmy. This was the end of February. So it was absolutely nuts. It's a scary thing and people just aren't thinking it through and just yeah, it's almost become just very part of mainstream life, and people aren't thinking about the fact that essentially people from climates like yours are going to have to move further and further north, away from the equator. It's going to, and all the complications it's going to bring for just everybody in the most extreme ways. But I know you're on top of this, know a lot more about this than I do.
well, we talked to lots of folks. I appreciate it. So we're kind of right on the top of the hour, and we've got a few people already in our audience here, and I am so excited to have you with us here today, Andrew. We had a conversation back a month or so ago, maybe even a couple months, and I enjoyed it so much. And he's got some things that he's going to talk to you about today, everybody, that you're going to enjoy. I think we'll do this as a kind of combination interview, and Mark has probably been developing a few background slides he can show us. And so we've got Mark in the behind the glass, as they say, and we've got Andrew and then myself. And what time of the day is it there at home, Andrew?
Right, 5 p.m.
5 p.m. Okay, that's not bad. We've interviewed a number of folks over in different places in the world where it's been midnight and different times. So it's a lot better to be 5 p.m. So tell us just a little bit about yourself and your business, and then we'll just start to go into a series of questions. And audience, please put your questions in the chat, and Mark will be looking at them. And then if anybody wants to raise their hand a little later after we've gone through this and ask questions of Andrew live, we might consider that. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of getting us started, telling us about yourself and your background, Andrew.
Yeah, so Andy, mid 50s, as you can see from my face. Born and raised in UK, spent most of my life in UK, and quite big into electric cars. Originally, I was an out and out petrol head, very much that kind of the guy who would drive through certain tunnels with my window rolled down while I was driving a V8 or something like that. But from about the early 2000s or late 20, about 2008 onwards, came to America because my past was software sales. Um, California, drove a couple of Teslas, not a Tesla fan, but drove a couple of Teslas. Couldn't believe the the performance, the basics of performance, and how clean they were. And then as a kind of former city dweller in the UK who's asthmatic but not used an inhaler since I left the city and moved to the countryside, came back and decided to set up a business factoring on promoting electric cars in 2010 when the UK market wasn't really quite ready for them. But pushed water uphill for a decade and now really starting to promote electric cars and just getting real traction in the UK on the benefits of those against the mixture of kind of climate deniers, a mixture of people who just are out and out anti-EVs, the majority of which have never drove them, and just going around the UK and joining people on podcasts and other talks to give open and honest advice on electric cars and where the kind of market's going and what the benefits are.
So did you form a company at that point? Is Fleet Evolution as a company that old, that many years? I didn't
Yeah,
want to say
wasted.
old.
Yeah, my background was HR software sales. So, for example, came to America to do a few shows and things like that. So I've been to various parts. Most interesting one was Texas. Loved Texas. The least interesting one was probably New York. But yeah, a few places to promote HR software. And at the end of my kind of HR software career, it was the credit crunch 2010. I had to look for something else to do because of a couple of reasons. The company I worked for was owned by KKR, who were a venture capitalist in the UK, and they cut about 2,000 jobs literally overnight. I wasn't one of them. I was very lucky. But I thought, what's the kind of purpose of working for a huge PLC or a huge private company, actually, when you're sweating blood and tears for them and they could just literally ditch you overnight, which I saw a lot of my friends go from being very stably employed to just having to seek a job and going home and tell the wife and kids things have changed dramatically. The second thing that happened was the advent of electrification. It was starting in the UK at that point. And to coincide with that, I'd had the advent of family changes. I'd had a couple of kids. Myself and my wife had never really wanted kids, but all of a sudden, at the age of nearly 40, both biological clocks kicked in. We decided we wanted kids. I had two kids immediately and then another one a little bit later. And I remember being in Detroit and my wife calling me and saying, Isabella's asked where her dad is, her first steps or first words, sorry. Well, where's dad? It was kind of mom, things like this. And then it was where's dad about 2 months afterwards. I was in Johannesburg when I was told that my daughter was taking her first steps. And I was thinking, I'm missing so much of this. And also having kind of concerns about the planet and where it's going. And just thought, actually, I've got this great opportunity to have a tax efficient way for people to get into electric cars. Because the company car tax in the UK was starting to be quite beneficial and the general taxation system was starting to be quite beneficial. So I need to go and do this. Spoke to some people I knew who had money to invest, started Fleet Evolution. And in all honesty, Wayne, I started it in 2010 because I thought by 2017 would be where we are now. But manufacturers have just been so reluctant to get on this movement, which it is now, and so reluctant to embrace electrification. And the government has been so inconsistent here in the UK about their policy. It took about 9 years until we're actually ready to become a mainstream project for the UK to get on board with, and for manufacturers then to get on board and respond to the demand which had built up. So it took a long time to actually get the business off the ground. Whereas we sit here today with kind of 2,000 vehicles, so decent size, about 600 customers, ranging from 3 employee businesses up to 8,000 employee businesses. And we're now at the stage where, luckily, we're just trying to encourage people to go into the right electric car rather than just fighting over rumour mill that electric cars will explode, burn, and kill everybody, which is what we've been dealing with for the last kind of 5 years.
So then you didn't in there, if I do the timeline right, you were, as you just started to see things grow after 9 years, then the pandemic hit. So not too long after that. So you were affected by that. So yeah, we all we've all gone through our timing issues as we've done business over the years. So now tell us briefly, and then we'll go into more detail. What does Fleet Evolution do? And if I was a potential customer, give me how you'd be giving me a little bit of a sales pitch for it.
Yeah, so our overall goal is to save the planet one electric car at a time. We do that via a method of car acquisition called salary sacrifice cars, which basically means an employer can offer their team, who just need a car for life rather than their job, access to electric cars through their pre-tax salary. So before any stoppages, before any deductions, before anything like that. So it basically makes a brand new electric car on our scheme about the same cost as keeping a 10-year-old diesel on your drive or on your forecourt. So really, really easy way for people to get into electric cars and enjoy the benefits they bring.
Super. And what's a story you can remember right off the top of your head of someone that you were explaining this to? They weren't maybe quite getting it, and then they did, and now they're a valid and avid customer. Do you have a little story of a business or an individual?
Yeah, possibly my wife. In when you
Oh,
talk about an individual, so my wife was one of those lucky people. She had a self-filling electric car, not a self-charging hybrid as I call them, but this self-filling one. It always arrived home empty. The next morning, it always seemed to be full for her. This was magic to my wife. This was just something which just happened. She had no idea how this concept all happened. And she was very, very anti electrification because, first of all, she felt it would be, she's a bit of a technophobe. My wife is a teacher. I do joke that she should actually go into private consultancy, just testing people's IT systems, because literally all she needs to do is touch it and it breaks. So she's very nervous about the technology. Despite the fact that she never drives more than 100 miles, she's very nervous about the fact that obviously she jumps into a Skoda Enyaq, now in her case, and it's got very low range. So it took a long time to get her to make the move to electric. I had to buy one. I left it on the drive initially because it looked like petrol and diesel, and just said to her, "Just it's ready to go. Just drive it like you would a normal car." Um, and the turnaround moment for her was when she was driving through our local town. This is a bit immature, but that's my wife. And we had two lanes going into one, and a boy racer pulled up alongside her, and she just pushed the pedal. And in this little family estate, absolutely obliterated her. Obliterated him, sorry. And that was a turning point for her where she really came around to the simplification of electrification and all the benefits it brings.
I gotta ask this. Does does she listen to music while she's driving? Because that's the other, especially with windows down, with an electric vehicle, you don't have those other noise. It's actually just like you might be, especially when you're out in the country, like you might be on your bicycle or walking or something. Has she commented about that at all?
She hasn't. I do have. I've got a very varied music taste, and bizarrely, on a morning early on, one of my favourite tracks or favourite artists is Catherine Jenkins. Now, this is not normally me, but she is a Welsh opera singer,
All right.
and she sings classic songs. And sometimes I was listening this morning, for example, to a track called "Abide with Me," which I'm not sure how well known it is in America, but probably quite well known. And I was listening to that, and just for clarity, everything else was absolutely perfect. But then, of course, in the background, we have this wonderful backdrop, not of a brass section or anything like that, but actually of just birds singing. For my wife, she is what the UK term would be a dance head. So she likes very cheesy dance music, and she does appreciate the fact that's not interrupted by kind of big booming engine noise in the background, and she can just listen to it and enjoy it.
So now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. When you were describing the customer types you have, you mentioned one that had as many as 8,000 employees. Now tell us, what was the sales process there? That was an exciting day when you signed them up, it sounds like.
That was a scary day. I remember because we're a fairly small company. We employ just 28 people, so relatively small. And I remember the benefits of our company is everybody that comes on board is through an apprentice program, which is basically a government training program, but where we train them and they give them kind of office skills and operational skills and all those kind of things. I remember the first day they had literally about 600 people register for a login to be able to access our portal and get quotes. And we had to get people who were in other parts of the business at that point to come back to our driver line team to manually just help them and just take away that particular strain. The sales process, it's always really, in a lot of ways, obviously, we love this particular customer. I won't name them for obvious reasons, but I prefer dealing with smaller businesses because with smaller businesses, they put the scheme in because they genuinely want to give back to their employees and give
Mhm.
back to the planet. Whereas with larger businesses, they tend to do it either because of financial savings, which obviously is great, but you know, or because they've been put under pressure by a type of union, an employee committee where their employees are saying, please do this because it's good for us. So that process took about 15 months, I think, going from obviously pre-qualification questionnaire initially, jumping through all those hoops, through to at the end, rewriting all our documentation, rewriting a lot of our processes and procedures to suit them because they are probably a lot more process heavy than most of our customers. We generally like to keep things really simple. Even things as bizarre as insisting we don't put emojis on emails because we're a small business. We're generally quite friendly. A smiley at the end of an email is fairly commonplace for us. We're not allowed to do this particular customer. We're just not allowed to do that. We've been a customer now for 4 years. People are now renewing their electric vehicles. They are coming back to the market and they are blown away by the type of options that are out there now compared to kind of 4 years ago. And the other thing, which is really interesting, is people who haven't got such a demanding need for cars. They're not badge snobs, they're not after a Porsche, they're not after a Jaguar or things like this. They're just basically in small everyday cars and they can now move into a brand new electric car through our scheme for less money than keep that 10-year-old one at the end of the drive. So it makes it a lot more affordable for them to be able to electrify.
So, Mark, do you have anything you can put on in terms of either the company website or other materials?
Yes.
Why don't you throw that up and let
Okay. So yeah, I will share my screen and show everybody um his website. So this is give me a second. I'll put this on screen.
Hopefully it's
by the
not
way,
crashed.
this is a new hat that I have because it says Summit Environmental. The sun's not so easy, but it's got some pictures of some mountains on it. It's a company that I just acquired. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm for the first time in a long time in doing a roll up of environmental companies. And this is the first acquisition of our roll up. So,
So,
and
so what do they do?
they do a whole wide variety of environmental consulting work related to companies that have caused some pollution and they're now are cleaning it up. So they
Wow.
come up with solutions to deal with environmental contamination in soils, in groundwater, and other sorts of media. And then they also help homeowners who have problems with things like mold or moisture issues or vermin, rats, mice, other sorts of pests that would be a potential problem. And that side of it, and by the way, we bought the stock of the company. So we basically got all their assets, and we have a transition period where the two principals for the company, the two guys that founded it, will continue to work for us, but they're not in control anymore.
Yeah.
And that's always hard when a
Mm.
person has been running something for 30 years, like these guys have. And now I'm the guy that's sort of making the decision. But it's been a great time that we've had over the last month as we've been doing this transition. But the acquisition
Amazing.
just happened last Monday, so a week ago yesterday. So
And
anyway,
they've at least
I'm wearing the hat
got
because I had it made. So
yeah, but at least got a controlling investor now who cares about the actual success for business and the effect on the environment rather than just maximizing profits. So that's
Yeah.
amazing opportunity for them because it is kind of, I always try and describe it to people. This is a new industrial revolution. You know, if we have a lot of apprentices, and a lot of our apprentices now are doing a university-backed climate practitioner qualification because I feel even if not for fleet evolution, it's got added benefits for fleet evolution. But when they go to make their next step into proper work in their mid-20s, that'll be fantastically beneficial for them. And yeah, it's just the whole opportunity this has opened up for everybody. It's just a complete game changer, isn't it? They can revolutionize their own life and save the planet at the same time, which is amazing.
So everybody, you see now the website, and why don't you describe what we're seeing on the screen here, and do you use this as a sales tool? Is it educational? Is it do you actually have your sign up documents inside of this and tracking if a customer is needing to, or is it mostly just a informational document for the public?
It's mainly a brochure site, but then we do have a lot of news articles on there. So people, quite often I'll talk on the university circuit or the circuits in the UK. And generally, you do tend to get two kind of people on the electric vehicle market. You get people who are completely anti it and people who are very, very pro it. I'm a little bit more pragmatic than that. So in the UK, certainly for 40% of us, we can't go electric. We can't charge at home. We're in apartment blocks or terrace housing or things like this. And if you can't charge at home, it doesn't make sense. But for 60% of us that do have that drive or garage or things like this, it's the simplest thing to do in the world to actually go electric. Just get home, plug your car in, it recharges while you charge. And there's all that kind of information on there to help people make that informed decision. We also do bits of consultancy as well. So again, very UK specific, but great benefits to take this approach all over the world to actually have some kind of telematics tracking device in either a car or a commercial fleet, a haulage fleet, things like this. And actually you can overlay with simple AI tools quite often where your charge infrastructure is, wherever you are in the world, and where cars or vans or lorries are getting to the end of that actual usable range. So you can see how easy it is for you to actually go green. And obviously, we can do that for people in the UK, other companies can as well. I'm sure you've got connections that could do that in the US, but people could do it themselves very, very simply all over the world and just see how simple it would be to move to electric for the infrastructure perspective just by using simple AI.
And where else in the world do you think or know that there are benefits, taxes, other types of credits, subsidies, which is what we did previously have. The US has stopped a number of our subsidies that were in place at least a couple of years ago. My son, and I don't remember whether I told you this or not, Andrew, but has a fleet business. He owns a FedEx franchise,
Yeah.
and he has 39 vehicles, of which he was mandated when he about 3 years ago to get a certain percentage of his fleet to be electric. So he has that and he has more. But I think of his 39 vehicles, I think 12 are about a third are electric, and then the rest are still traditional. In our case, he actually runs more gasoline rather than diesel powered vehicles. And you probably know that here in the US, our cost for gasoline is cheaper than the cost for diesel in most markets. But let's go back to my question. How duplicatable is what you're doing, and or have you thought about doing it in other countries?
So for our particular scheme, it's heavily dependent on the tax system.
Okay.
So we have spoke to Ireland, but we're not through there yet. We spoke to Germany, and are getting decent sound bites, but not quite got the traction there. In the EU generally, and Europe generally, there are quite heavy penalties for people producing cars coming down the road if they can't lower their overall footprint, the CO2. So if you look at somebody like, I'll say something quite contentious, look at somebody like VW Audi, and I drive an Audi, I love Audis. If they can't lower their CO2 footprint significantly, they're looking at billions in terms of fines and penalties. Now, obviously, arguably, they could lower their footprints tonight by just changing the software they use for measurements, but I think we've kind of got wise to that. If they want to cut 2 grams of CO2 off a car like mine, which is I've got a Q5 version, but it's called an e-tron, it's pure electric, they would have to invest billions to be able to do that. If they can create an electric car that use all similar parts apart from the actual motor and other essential bits for electrification, that's a much lower cost for them. So a lot of European countries now are bringing in benefits to manufacturers, like for example in the UK, if you can show the footprint of your electric cars, your cheaper electric cars, is below a certain level, you could get subsidies of £3,500 on that car from the government. There are similar subsidies coming in. Norway is a huge market, which is kind of odd because we're all told electric cars don't work in the cold. They don't work in remote locations. Norway, I think 90%, over 90% of their new cars last year were electric. And there's big government savings and incentives there as well. In France, they have penalties now if you drive into a city centre in a non-electric car. You have to pay quite heavy financial burdens for that. They've got amazing infrastructure. And even as we go forward to Central Europe, the only country, however, that has a scheme actually like ours, exactly like ours, is bizarrely the other side of the world from us, which is Australia, where they do have what we call salary packaging to allow people to give up parts of their pre-tax salary and take all the direct tax and I benefits for electrification.
And have you talked about doing anything like you're doing in Australia then, or is it that a possibility?
We've spoke about it. I think we're focused on more local markets first of all. So, for example, the Southern Irish one or Ireland market is a great opportunity for us because we already have quite a lot of customers in Northern Ireland. So it's very, very easy to transfer the resource, the skill set, the expertise over to Southern Ireland. We were quite close to getting it agreed pre-COVID. That set us back. We're lobbying the government to try and get that in there. But, governments are very busy organisations, vast organisations, and monoliths to actually change quickly, which is the one challenge we have.
I see we're looking at some awards and recognitions right now on the page that Mark was just on. Any of those that you're more proud of than another that you might mention, and tell us what you did to earn whichever it would be?
The award I'm most proud of, to be honest, which might be of interest to your general audience apart from just the green credentials, we won an award through the Chambers of Commerce. Does that make sense to you, Wayne? Chambers
Yes,
of Commerce.
absolutely. Yep, we have them all over there. Yes, that was.
So we won one there in 2015. Ignore that one. That's not one I'm most proud of. One I'm most proud of, which we won the Midlands one and we won the national one, was for our apprentice program and career development. So as a business, my background, I was similar to a lot of people's backgrounds, one parent family, state housing, in my case, a kind of high-rise tower block in the city. Dropped out of college because the family needed money, never went to uni or anything like this. And I've always been a little bit frustrated that so much emphasis, especially in the UK, was on university qualifications because a lot of people from poorer backgrounds struggle to get that. So when I set up Fleet Evolution, we set up an apprenticeship program so we could bring people on, train them in the whole business, train them in electrification, train them in different avenues and parts of our business. And I think we've taken on about 100 apprentices over the years. The vast majority have completed that time with us. As we sit here today, I think 75% of our employees joined us as apprentices and have developed through the business. 5 of 8 of our leadership team started as apprentices. And even people who have moved on from us, to see the careers they've developed, the apprenticeship program is probably one I'm most proud of because it's people that are going to be here when our environment is messed up, long after we've left the planet, Wayne. Well, certainly me. I won't wish that on you, but probably long after we've gone. They'll be shaping the future, but also really shaping their career and moving from kind of just general service level jobs into giving real value to the business. I remember one girl we worked with Aston University. She's working at a very high level for a car charging company. There's somebody else that's working in logistics for a major retailer that's shaping their green vision. And it's great to see these people just take all those core skills we gave them and just maximize that opportunity and make a real difference to the whole planet, not just themselves and their own family environment.
Well, that's a huge passion for us also, Andrew. We appreciate that that's where your passions lie. Also, let me ask a quick question. What are you finding right now? And so not 5 years ago, not even, before that, with the current status of the education that those young people that you're coming in as new associates with you and that you're putting into the apprenticeships, are they better or less qualified? My experience here in the US is we're not getting as qualified a people as we were 5 to 10 years ago. And I think college educations, university educations in the US at least, are putting too much emphasis on what I'm going to call broadly liberal arts, which is fine. And I think one of the benefits of going to a university or college is the social side. You just can't get that probably at home, and you need to be away from parents and siblings maybe, and even older, childhood friends, and learning to know others. But they don't have some of the technical skills. What are you finding? Do your apprentices have to get more education internally, or are they coming in pretty well prepared?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we have a lot more people coming from a university background now, but their basic level of knowledge to make them suitable for work is significantly lower. So even as an apprenticeship, I've actually been interviewing today for some more apprentices because we're expanding. We've had people with firsts at university, things like this that have come in. But the old days of kind of going to university and working at the side of it to learn all those life skills seem to have gone. There's a lot more people that just leave university in the UK with a lot of debt. They're doing kind of, oh, how do I word this delicately? Less commercially valuable degrees, so media studies, psychology, things like this, which are they're very, very popular degree subjects now, but the amount of people taking that degree to the amount of jobs they can actually use those qualifications in are very, very low. It's and I think when we get people in, I think as well, Wayne, because of what we went through with lockdown in the UK, I think people struggle to kind of hold eye contact. We've got to teach people to actually use the phone. Bizarre situation. I've got a 17-year-old daughter. She'll hate me for saying this, but they communicate via voice notes. They don't actually pick up the phone and speak to each other. She sends him a voice note. She waits. He replies with a voice note. So I said to her, like, why don't you just pick up the phone and have a conversation? She looks at me like I'm crazy. And of course, in business, you don't have time to send voice notes. You need to have conversations and build that relationship, build that rapport. She doesn't seem to have those skill sets, and neither do a lot of the people coming for interviews. So I think generally the level of real world skill is a lot lower. I mean, back in our day, I don't know whether you had do you have paper rounds in the US, Wayne?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah.
I had
Well,
one.
yeah, kids can't do it now over here. They are overprotective. There's so much legislation. The thought of loading up a 14-year-old youth with a kind of 10-kilo bag full of papers, you can't do. So they never meet anybody. They just live at home. They live on the phones. The level of social awareness, social interaction is, sounds a proper bitter old man now, but is so lacking. People just do not have that basic skill level. 9 times out of 10, even people with a degree don't know how to spell the three versions of two, two T-O, two
Yep,
T-double-O,
yep,
two
yep.
T,
That's
two
right. You're right.
W-O.
Wow.
And we have to train people how to do this. It's just, it's frustrating and quite a challenge for us business owners, isn't it? Just to be able to do that.
Or two versions of there.
Yes.
THCIR,
Yes. Yeah.
THERE. Yes. No, that's right. Um, Well, it sounds like it's not just a U.S. circumstance. It is a UK and probably worldwide. And I think it
Yeah,
is because of this device I've got in my hand right now. I don't
yeah,
honestly, Andrew, most of my webinars I do in my studio where I have a studio microphone and I've all of the, the equipment that's needed to have a little bit better quality and little different. I don't do it on a phone often, but I don't live on my phone at all. Matter of fact, a lot of times, if possible, I'll try to intentionally forget it so I don't have it with
yeah.
me when I'm doing certain things. But yet my grandchildren, and I have some that are in their teenage years, and they live with them. I mean, they literally, you'd think the world had ended if they weren't able to be doing something with their phones. So Mark's got what is your son's 15 now, Mark? And and I'm sure he's probably on
Yeah.
his phone more than you'd like. So
Right. Yeah, he's going to be 18.
18. Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez. Um, Time flies. Mark's been with me, Andrew, for 15 plus years now. And we've just enjoyed each other. And most of the time, sometimes we're harder on each other than we should be. But anyway, how about let's talk technology a little bit. How are you seeing things change in your business to help you with either AI or just things that are going on? Maybe it's onboarding, maybe it's keeping track of the savings that people get interacting with governments and so on, marketing, sales. How is that? And then let's move from that to what are other alternative green fuels that you see that could occur in the future? And I'm going to use an example being hydrogen, because Dennis Weaver who was the founder of the Institute of Economics, was convinced that before electric, that hydrogen would become our fuel source.
I
And
agree.
it's
Yeah.
not, it hasn't occurred. There are research going on. There is research going on with some of the major car companies and vehicle companies, but still it's not there yet. So I'm curious about what your thoughts about other alternatives and what they're going to be.
Firstly, do you have any interference on the microphone behind me? Do I need to ask my cleaners to stop
Oh
hoovering?
no, we don't hear
No?
it at all. We don't
Okay,
hear it.
that's good.
You're
Just very
coming in
aware
just
we've
as
got the
well
upper
as we.
speeder in
No,
because we've closed now. It's 5:30 and she's hoovering.
no,
Yeah,
we
so
don't hear.
the hydrogen one is a frustration, to be honest. I love electrification. Hydrogen, I think all over the world, is almost chicken and egg, isn't it? The cars are too expensive, and there's nowhere to get hydrogen fuel stations. I think last time I looked for something like 30 in the UK hydrogen fuel stations. And obviously, it's a bit of a misnomer because you've got green hydrogen, you've got blue hydrogen, you've got different types of hydrogen. So it's not quite as green in a lot of cases as people think. But yeah, hydrogen could be a huge opportunity, and they just needed to get together and lobby governments. It's a bit like in the UK, 15 years ago, we were all told to buy diesels because diesels were absolutely amazing. And now diesels are the devil. And we know diesels have a lot of failings, but we also know generally they're a lot less polluting than a modern diesel is less polluting than some electric, some petrol engines. Sorry. So that technology, I feel it's a shame that it's not been adopted. And I also do feel when it comes to haulage and heavier vehicles, it's very frustrating that people have kind of tried to jump on the electric bandwagon when, of course, the batteries are so expensive. And if you do want to have a haulage vehicle, they tend to be heavy, kind of 44 tons, that type of weight. So you need such a huge battery to power it just to move all the load. Why we can't be more behind hydrogen with that, I don't know. We have a gas cylinder company ourselves that's into this technology. They use our electric cars. They also provide hydrogen for train services, for boats, for buses. I can only assume, call me a cynic, but it's for tax revenue. In the UK, we pay VAT, value added tax, a sales tax on electricity. And I can only assume that they find it easier to get the sales revenue that way than hydrogen, where they're not quite sure how to tax it yet. And probably the electricity companies have a better lobbying team to lobby Parliament, a kind of Congress, than the alternative of hydrogen. So I think hydrogen should really have had all the investment in it. The common excuse, like I say, is there's nowhere to charge, the cars are too expensive. Both of those would fall away, as electric did, if we could just have a little bit more investment, a little bit more strategy.
What's your gut tell you of when we're going to see the big breakthrough with battery technology? And so that we're moving away
Oh,
from
so
technology
yeah,
that's very old. I mean, lithium,
yeah,
any other kind that's a 50-year-old technology that we're still working with.
it is.
So,
But then, how old's petrol and diesel? So
well,
it's
yeah, oh, they're older. Yeah, I know, I get it. But I'm just saying, I always ask, when do people, do you see any evidence that we're going to see a breakthrough to have batteries that are both longer charging and we don't have to worry about them being hazardous waste when we end their lives?
so hazardous waste, I think, is a lot easier. Now something like 95%, no, 99.5% of a battery could be recycled. So it's starting to happen. We're kind of looking at the secondary market to support electric vehicles in the same way that we have with petrol or diesel. So a lot of people talk about, for example, what happens when your battery goes in an electric car. I always say to people, what happens if your motor goes in your diesel? If you go to a dealer, you're going to pay £15,000 for a new motor. If you go to a back street mechanic who can get the old parts, you'll probably pay £1,000 to get it transferred over for a reconditioned motor. The same is happening with battery electrification. So, for example, I've recently brought my daughter a Nissan Leaf, 2018 Nissan Leaf, so an older one, for her to have as a first car. If the battery gives up at some point, it's no longer warranted. Or I know there's a company in Gloucester, particularly pretty area of England, that will sell a reconditioned one they'll fit for about £1,500. So a company called Cleverly Auto, and they will do that for that. And we need that kind of aftermarket for every electric car, don't we, to make them more accessible and to make them last longer. In terms of the technology, there's been quite a few forays into solid state. Toyota are making big lines into it and big developments. Kira's starting to make developments into it. Solid state will lower the actual weight. You probably know more about this than I do, Wayne, but lower the weight and increase the range. So both holy grails. Although I do think the range argument is a bit of a misnomer because obviously everybody seems to go on about a 600-mile car. Whoever needs one? It's nuts. And in terms of charging infrastructure, there are providers out there now that can provide charging infrastructure which can literally give you a full charge in lab conditions in 5 minutes. We are waiting to see that be able to adopt in mainstream, A, because of the safety conditions and the technical limitations, and B, just because of the grid in the UK. You'd need something that can give you something like 1,000 kW/hour charging to be able to give you that type of charge rates. And finding a place in the grid that can do that are few and far between. But there's more of them coming. The downside of COVID we spoke about earlier is obviously people are moving more onto online. So again, this way, looking at this to do with shopping and all those kind of things, which means a lot of these outer city retail parks are going, and a lot of those already have the electric infrastructure to support really high speed charging. Again, it is a misnomer, isn't it? It's like, well, why do you need 600 miles in a car? I've got 200 miles in my car. It's not one of
right,
the
right.
longest
Yep, that is
range
a
cars.
huge. It's a little different here in the rural areas of the states.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Texas, and a lot of the people in the Western United States do drive more or have to get farther, some means of transportation. Unfortunately, one of the things I would love to see much more of is mass transportation so that we would have our buses have electric power and then more people use them. So that's a cultural problem that we have in the Western United States, I think. The East and places like New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Farley, it probably is about as far west as you'll see more mass transportation. Um, excuse me. One of our audience, however, has said something. I want to make sure, if possible, that we look at this. Mark, you see the website that one of our members has put up on. Maybe you could pull that. It's a site called ecoquest.io, and it's water fuel technology describing. And this fella, and I'm not going to give any names, that would be giving away some privacy, but says he'd love to talk with you at some point, Andrew, about potential collaboration. Let's just see what his website looks like here real quick. Mark's going to pull it up.
Okay. So yeah, give me a second. I'll pull that up here.
I mean, one of the great things about this marketplace, Wayne, you probably don't suffer it as much as I do, but when I jump on podcasts with a few people and go to university sessions with a few people, and there's always so much to learn and so many people doing something new. When I did a bit of background on yourself, for example, it was the stuff you're up to. It just blows my mind. It's just so far ahead. Where my knowledge is, I read it, I'm impressed. I don't understand a lot of it, but it seems really impressive. And then even when we had our first kind of informal chats, some things you were telling me that you're doing at home was amazing. So we're always very, very eager to collaborate because so many people have unbelievable ideas and innovations.
Mark, pull your screen up. Yeah, there you go. Here's this site, Andrew. I don't know if you're seeing it. I am.
Yeah.
Economy of Needs. Pretty cool. By the way, I just got a Instagram notification from a guy that I want to introduce you to at some point, Andrew, named David Knight. David is an amazing gentleman here in the States who has a geothermal resource down in Southern California that is being used to produce power for a fairly large area where it's a power source throughout the Western United States because of our volcanic activity in the past that is greatly underutilized. The city of Boise, where I live, all of our downtown is geothermally heated, but it's pretty rare, even though it could be done in a lot of other places. Mark, scroll, maybe click on a couple of places on his site there and just see what else we have. Well, we'll check this out in much more detail, and then I'm sure Andrew will get the replay from this and can be able to look at it too.
Yeah, I'll have a look at it.
Andrew, tell me, what are the other types of transportation? We're starting to see a lot more use, and I'm not one of them, but I'd love to be 30 years younger and do it, of e-scooters around our cities. And they're kind of dangerous at times. People do some things crazy with them, but e-bikes and e-scooters, tell me your thoughts of both of those.
Possibly similar to yours. It's, I mean, we have legs, don't we? It's when I see these people whizzing around on these e-bikes and e-scooters. First of all, I think it's probably the most emasculating thing you could possibly choose to use as a mode of transport. and secondly, yeah, most people. I think I've seen analysis that most people are doing kind of 500-meter runs on them and things like this, and just why don't you just use the emission-free device? Well, it's obviously not totally emission-free, but the emission-free device that you find at the bottom of your waistline, and just and have the health benefits and everything else. E-bikes is slightly different. We do have more people using those in the UK. I've used myself. I think when I went to Antigua, went on a bike ride with my daughters and my wife, and we had them just for there's not big hills in Antigua, but just for the slightly hillier bits. Seemed a little bit gimmicky. We do get the odd approach for them. I'm not overly aware of them, to be honest, Wayne. I am a man of a certain age, and I dismiss them with a fair degree of contempt.
What about mass transportation? I mentioned buses. Do you have electric trams still? We still do in some places in the US.
Yeah, if you were to
So,
go to places like Manchester and places like that, they have a really great public transport system. So very, very good. There's one of the big developments, I think, of electrification with cars will be that autonomous driving piece. I don't personally, and again, Wayne, you may or may not agree with me. I'm from nowhere near as rural as you are, but I'm from a part of rural UK in Staffordshire where I could never see automated driving taking control of things like village roads and things like this. But I could certainly see a time in my life when my daughter will drive under a motorway entry, and as she goes under a barrier, her car will then become automatically driving and will just join a queue of other vehicles going to London, for argument's sake, and form part of that kind of train, cutting down wind resistance, all enjoying different benefits. In Norway, they've tried things like roadway charging, so they can actually charge from the road vehicles at certain points. So I can see a big opportunity for people literally to just jump on the toll roads, the motorway, the major connectors, and charge while they move eventually, and actually just hands free, let the car control their journey, and then they just take over when they come off that toll road onto more rural roads.
by the way, I don't know, look at this. I'm older than you, and so one of those television shows that I watched was called The Jetsons, and it was back in the 1970s and maybe even late 60s. But it was the culture in the future where we would all have flying cars. Well,
Yes.
this is a electrical vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. We're seeing one of our watchers gave us a website for. And I think this is the future. This is going to happen, everybody. I don't know when. Again, maybe not in my lifetime, but um, there are a lot of logistical issues with them, just as there have been with drones. More generally, just I live about a mile away from a large Amazon distribution center that has already been targeted to be one of the very first in the United States that are going to be delivering packages with drones. And I'll
Ah,
probably have them delivered to my home because I'm very close to it using drones. And anyway, what about that? What do you think about, again, staying on a little bit different than just vehicles, cars, mass transportation, and then also either boats, trains, what do they say? Trains, planes, and automobiles. So here's the plane side here.
yeah, so we've got a customer in the UK, I can't remember the name, but they actually produce multi-purpose private jets electrified. So they're actually producing those at the moment and started to get some success and some traction. They couldn't work with a lot of companies in our marketplace because they are a fairly new startup. And most companies, if they're backed by big banks and they won't necessarily fund you. Whereas we looked at the story and thought that's a great story and did it. On another personal note, um, at the moment, bizarrely, because I'm getting to a certain age, I'm looking at barges. So you aware of barge, narrowboats in the UK? They are kind of narrow boats, which
We
sleep about
don't
eight
have
people.
nearly as many of them. Remember, we
Okay.
don't have nearly the amount of inland waterways that you will see throughout Europe.
Yeah.
We don't, our inland waterways are large rivers that run, long distances, and that's where there is a lot of barge traffic, a lot of freight traffic. Matter of fact, that's probably the dominant type of vehicle that's using them. But we don't have the smaller waterways. I can't think of a U.S. city. New Orleans would come maybe one of the closest that has, and Chicago has a little bit, but they're not used at all for transportation.
Yeah,
And they
in the UK, so we have these obviously mainly from Industrial Revolution, when boats were offloaded at the ports and then they just move through man-made waterways inland. And we have something called a barge, which is a leisure vehicle that goes very, very slowly, about 4 miles an hour on these waterways. And we're now starting to see incentives to move those to electrification with solar panels on top, so they move by themselves. I'm actually looking to buy one at the moment because it's just a nice thing to do at weekend, just a fun thing to do. So looking at those again, one of the frustrations with electric vehicles, to be brutally honest, is that dependence still on diesel powered boats, which are obviously emitting huge amounts, bringing these vehicles from China and other places, and really hurting the green credentials of these cars. So we need a lot of investment in those. Waterways seem a perfect example of somewhere where electrification can work incredibly well because there's so little friction, but we're not really investing as heavily as we should.
We have like 7 minutes left, everybody. We try to stay really on our time clock for our speakers and our audience. And thank you, audience, for the nice questions you put in. I want to go to a controversial topic that we haven't hit on at all for another form of power. What is your attitude about nuclear, especially small scale?
I think it needs one heck of a lot more investment, and I can see no reason why we're not investing more heavily into it. I know obviously the byproducts are very difficult to manage and difficult to control and dispose of, but for the amount of investment we've had into this, it's still in its infancy and incredibly powerful. So I would be very supportive of more investments into nuclear technology.
And by the way, everybody knows this. I'm in the same boat, and
Okay, good.
I grew up post obviously the horrible use of anything nuclear, and during the time when large scale nuclear was proliferating around the world. I mean, literally, the first those non third world countries all over Europe, all over the US. And I know that a lot of nuclear plants in Europe have shut down. We've had a lot less of that occurring here in the States, but there is a current little nuclear plant that's smaller than a small car in size in eastern Idaho that's producing power to run a town of 5,000 people.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Yeah, so
Oh,
definitely needs more investments. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, what else do you want to pass on with us? We have UK visitors. We have people from the UK. So everyone that's in the UK, please check out Fleet Evolution and get a car and get it enrolled, get it in the system. But what else would you like to tell us about, Andrew, before we reach the end of our hour here?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like in the US, but certainly in the UK, the main thing is, guys, just drive one. Just have a go in one. In the UK, I think we did a survey of Aston University, and something like 90% of people who were very anti-EV had never even drove one. And that's the crucial thing. It's just, if you imagine when we first learned about combustion powered engines, imagine if we're then all on board with electrification. We just never go back. You'd never go back to this horrifically expensive fuel that you have to mine from the ground in really difficult locations, which was just incredibly difficult to transport around and refill. And we've kind of got a little bit, from habit, we've got used to that. Just try electrification, just try these cars, see how capable they are. Try a few, don't just try one. So, for example, Tesla were the pioneers. I personally am not a fan of Tesla. I think they've done great things in the marketplace, but to drive, I personally find them really dull. You'll find a car for you. Just try them. That's the crucial thing, whether you do it through us or through whoever.
Andrew, just quickly, because you can do it off the top of your head, list main brands that we probably all would know that have electric vehicles. Just
Yeah, so Ford are behind the times, but Ford have some good electric vehicles. Obviously, Volkswagen Audi Group, all of their key brands have electric vehicles and really good quality. Um, Mercedes are coming out with some really good electric vehicles as well. The Chinese brands are really, really good. If you're not too much of a badge snob, which I potentially am, then really popular. Our most popular car on the scheme at the moment is something called a JQ5. I may be pronouncing that wrong. So I've heard some people pronounce it Jacko, but it's kind of the same size as a small Land Rover, but it doesn't have half as many warning lights. It's very cheap to run, and it costs our customers about £300 a month with everything included, no deposit. So really, really compelling opportunity or proposition for people who are just looking for a huge amount of car.
Well, and
Who are really,
I think Nissan has, I think Kia, I think Toyota, Japanese. So that if you just do a little search of whatever you use as a search tool, you're going to find lots of them that are out there, and it's growing all the time. You didn't mention BMW, who I think has several different options. What about more of what we would call the hybrid here? I don't follow and see that market is growing, and maybe it shouldn't be. But what are your thoughts about hybrids?
it's so for people who can't charge easily, plug-in hybrid is still an option because obviously the more modern plug-in hybrids, you can get 40, 50 mile range. So if you can only charge at the office, for example, like my staff charge here, we've got solar panels to power it, so it's really easy for them, really low cost. But at a weekend, they need maybe 40, 50 miles. They've got a reassurance they can move to petrol or diesel when they use all that range. But the problem is, obviously, you're having two engines. So you've got a lot more weight behind it. And then obviously it's burning the diesel or the petrol to generate the electricity for it once it's used, or that particular battery, which is quite small, only 30, 40 miles. So if you imagine something like one of the first plug-in hybrids, which actually I had, Mitsubishi Outlander, um, they advertised the miles per gallon of something like 300 miles per gallon using a very optimistic version of that fuel economy. It was actually doing about 30 miles to the gallon. So if you're doing mainly longer trips, doesn't really stack up. Only really stacks up for people who are constantly driving around cities, lots of braking. That's the only real people that works for, I find.
We are right at the top of the hour. Comments that we should get to. Um, this one member, I'm not going to mention a name, but it did a lot of very cool stuff here. I will make sure you get his name, and the two of you can maybe link up. So it looks like
Yeah,
cool.
I'll follow up.
One other one that we didn't hit on at all was in where Mark lives in third world areas. They drive so many horribly polluting two-cycle scooters. Those are the things we need to really replace with EV scooters,
Yeah.
because they are just awful in terms of what they're doing to the planet. So, and Mark, do you see any more non two cycle, where gas and oil are mixed, that are just giving all kinds of smoke and such off? Are you seeing any more electric in your country?
Yes, there are a lot of Chinese easy bike kind of things coming. They run on battery and one single motor. They carry like 3 or 4 passengers. So those kind of things are, yeah, they're getting popular.
Yeah.
And the 2 cycles are becoming less and less because of government
Now I'm going to
regulation.
apologize. I've got a train going past. You guys might hear it. I apologize. Keep going.
Yes. So yeah, the government regulations are against the 2 cycle engines that burn oil and produce all kind of emissions, gas, and everything. So that's
So,
harmful. Yeah.
right. So, Andrew, I'm going to end on this. You are, this train's going right by me. I'm going to turn this around and
Can't
see.
hear it, you're fine.
Anyway, This is our 10th anniversary year now. We're pretty excited about EAT having had 10 years. But Mark and I go farther back because before we did EAT, we used to do what we called the huddle, the eco huddle. And Mark, when did we start those? Maybe almost, gosh, 25 years. We're getting a long time, 20
Yes.
years ago at least. But anyway, I mention it only because we still have people that will go and look at those replays. Everybody will have a replay of Andrew's come up in about 2 days. Mark will have it ready. Andrew, you
Yes.
please go in and look. You will own it and be able to use whatever you want with it also. This has been very enjoyable. We'd love to have you back another time. So hopefully you'll get that additional, business in Ireland or other places, and maybe we'll see some things here in the U.S. But thank you so much. We appreciate it. And last words from you, Andrew, and then we'll kick it off.
It's been amazing, guys. I've huge respect for you, Wayne. You've forgotten more than I've learned. So, just doing brilliant things over there and great to meet such an empowered bunch who are just passionate about this subject.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.